What did the pirate say on his 80th birthday? Aye, matey. Do I need to spell it out? Why are pirate movies the coolest? They just are.
Why is it?
Just so you know, he's my favorite. All right. I guess we'll end on that note, but there's more tomorrow. Woo!
All right. So welcome to the workshop portion. This is your brain on stress. Just to warn you, this isn't like a typical workshop where you're going to be up and moving the whole time. We're going to build up to that part. We're going to do some kind of building block stuff first. For those of you who don't know me, I am Brett Bushman. I'm an Agile coach here at Great Lakes. I have 4 lovely children, which I tell you to establish I am an expert on stress.
Is that it? That's good?
That's it.
All right, I'm Holly Senzig. I do the career development specialist for Great Lakes Helmet. Those are my 2 little ones, and they're angels, so I don't get stressed. I wish. A fun fact about me is I got into running this year, so I did Ragnar. I started running half marathons, and so I like to do exercises. So all of you get to suffer today because we're going to do some exercises to also reduce stress. All right,
does it involve 12-ounce curls?
That's right after. That is part of the session. It's a little extended. 4:30 to 6:30, right back there. The goals of today are what causes stress. We're going to talk about the difference between healthy stress and unhealthy stress. And then we're going to talk about what signs to watch for in yourself as well as your team. We're going to go over some exercises to spot and reduce tension in your meetings and how everyone can prevent stress. We're also going to talk about some body language, again, for stress and how to identify it in your team and in your meetings. And then Brett is going to discuss what is actually happening in your brain and your body when you get stressed.
All right, there's 100 different causes of stress. We can break them down into general categories, internal and external, right? Internal, the things you are thinking, the stuff that you're getting on yourself about, things you're worrying about. External are things that other people or events are putting on to you, right? So we're going to talk about how we can take some of those, what we can influence, what we can control, what we can't control. And the reason we want to talk about all of this is because stress has a lot of negative impacts on our health. And we think it's incredibly important for you as either leaders on your teams or just members of the team to understand that so you can help your own teams be better. Right? A lot of the sessions you've heard are just about making your teams better, and we think this is a crucial part of that. All right, so healthy versus unhealthy stress. Right? There is short-term stress and there is long-term stress. Short-term stress can be incredibly good, right? If we're trying to run away from something, that's good short-term stress, right? If we're running from a lion or a bear, and bears are godless killing machines, we don't want to be anywhere near them, right? So we want to run away from this. That's good short-term stress. Stress becomes unhealthy when it becomes long-term stress, right? It actually rewrites our brains, and we're going to talk about how it does that when it moves into that long-term stress. Everyone reacts differently when they're stressed. There's kind of a chart that you can kind of chart it, but the 3 basic ones are fight, flight, or freeze. Everyone typically has kind of a go-to. You'll react differently under different situations. Like, for instance, mine is to fight when I get stressed. I just want to kind of pick a fight with everything, and so then I just have to run away for a little bit so I don't do that. Because I can't fight. I don't even know how to throw a proper punch. So it's not a great idea. Right? My 3-year-old daughter, she freezes. She just flops to the ground, which is fantastic when you're in traffic, by the way. Right? So it's important to recognize what our own symptoms are, or not symptoms, but our own reactions are, and then as we get to know our team, understand what their reactions tend to be so we can recognize it in them, so we can say, okay, things are stressed. how do we take this down? How do we manage this stress better so that we can actually have productive team meetings and just generally work together better? All right, so there's some techniques we're going to talk about throughout this entire session on how to reduce stress, and we're going to build on them. And we're going to start out with a super basic one. It's called square breathing. And just kind of by a show of hands, will you guys agree to try these things out with us as we walk through them? Right? It's only going to be effective if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, it's only going to stress you out more. Right? That's the opposite of what we're going for here. All right, so the first one is going to be square breathing. And I'm going to walk you through it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. And I will count us off as we do it, right? So we'll go 2, 3, 4. We're going to hold it for 4 seconds, right? We're not going to exhale. We're going to hold it inside as long as possible. If you can't, that's fine. Don't stress about it. Again, not our goal. Do the best you can. And then we're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. We're going to wait, and we're going to repeat this. We're going to do it 2 or 3 times. All right, I'm going to make that call on the fly depending on how stressed you guys look. All right, are we ready? All right, ready? Breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Now breathe it out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4. All right, now just chill for 4. 2, 3, 4. Right. Breathe back in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. All right, now hold. 2, 3, 4. Now breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Now wait. 2, 3, 4. All right, you guys seem more calm. Looks like it. I think I'm the only one that's nervous up here. I'm trying to decide if this is nervous energy I'm dancing around the stage or just my ADD kicking in. It's hard to say on a day-to-day basis. All right. So what is actually happening in our brains when we get stressed? Right? So when we identify a stressful situation, and this is something that our brain does without our conscious knowledge, it happens very deep in the brain, right? Kind of in the brainstem area, our amygdala, and our kidneys release a ton of a chemical called cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone in your brain that basically primes you for fight, flight, or freeze. Hopefully not freeze. Terrible way to survive a lion attack. So that's going to prep us. It's going to release adrenaline. It's going to get us ready to go. Right? But when that happens, it's actually going to put the parts of our brain that learn, that remember things, that make rational decisions into a super low power mode, because those parts of our brains evolved after everything else. And it turns out they're kind of inefficient to run compared to everything else. So if they didn't go into a low power mode, we would overheat and we would die. Right? It's just like if your computer overheated and it just goes away. Right? So we have to go into low power mode. So we can't actually make good, rational decisions or learn things effectively if we are stressed. Right? That's why I opened the door earlier, so you guys felt a little more comfortable when that's stressed. Because it was warm in here, right? Was it just me? Oh, it's just me? Okay, cool. All right. Well, I learned something. All right, so a lot of the techniques we're going to talk about then today are going to talk about how do we trigger things like serotonin and oxytocin and some dopamine that's going to kill that cortisol and allow our brains to reset themselves, right? So listed off 3 hormones there. Serotonin, that's kind of the, hey, everything's cool hormone, right? That's when we feel happy. When we smile, we release serotonin. When we accomplish a goal, we release dopamine, right? It's one of the most powerful chemicals in our brain. Also highly addictive, right? It's the chemical behind both heroin and cheese addiction. So, you know, cheese is actually addictive. There's research on it. It triggers dopamine in your brain, and you can get, because your brain says, hey, I want more dopamine, I want more dopamine, I want more dopamine. What gave that to me? Cheese gave that to me. So, you take nothing else but this. Cheese is addictive. Trust me. It's my stress eat of choice. All right, so the long-term effects, right? So the stress response is designed to be short-term. If it goes long-term, if that amygdala hijacking constantly is occurring, it's actually going to rewire your brain to constantly be in a stressed out state, because your brain says, hey, these neurons are constantly firing together. I'm going to make bigger pathways between them. So the parts of your brain that regulate stress are actually going to get increased throughput, right? So they're actually going to fire stress more often. You're going to have a harder time learning things. You're going to have a harder time making rational decisions because you're going to constantly go into that stressed out state. If you're curious, that's called PTSD. Right? You can get PTSD from just about anything. Right? It doesn't have to be combat. There's different levels of it, but we can get PTSD from all kinds of stuff. And it's going to trigger our brains to go into that stressed out mode right away. Because your brain says, hey, this stressed me out, I've done this before, I survived it this other way. Let's deal with it how I've dealt with that in the past, which is to go in ultra stress mode. Right, so this is actually your brain on stress. This is the title slide right here. This one right here, you can actually see where the parts of your brain that are firing are different now when you're stressed. It's the same brain. Right? And so those parts of our brain are actually that don't. Our brain also trims the neurons. The parts of our brain that are in charge of learning and memory and making decisions are going to have, those pathways are going to start to degrade. Fortunately, there are things we can do, both for ourselves and help our teams recognize when they're stressed so that they can get the benefits from it too, that will build those pathways back up. So hooray, it's not all doom and gloom.
All right, so we're going to move into our first exercise. When we're stressed, our bodies become tense. So this exercise is a 6-minute exercise that is good for when you're in the office, you're in a cube, you've been sitting all day, things you can do in between meetings, on your breaks. It is also great to do throughout the day or at night when you get home as just an exercise to unwind for the day.
So do these to the best of your ability. We're going to need to stand up.
We're going to need you to spread out.
Yep, spread out a little bit. You're going to need some room. I know it's a little cramped.
Oh,
There's a lot of people standing. All right, everyone. We're going to start it. Do everything to the best of your ability. I can't do half of them, so do not worry. I'll just stand up here looking awkward.
Yeah, so there's going to be some moves. If you're uncomfortable doing them, don't do it. Again, we're not here to stress you out. Some of them, they actually like bend over and bend down. There's a lot of you and a lot of people behind you, so if you don't want to do it, we're all right with that.
All right.
Hey guys, it's Kelly from fitnessblender.com, and today I have a feel-good stretch for you. This is a great routine to do at your desk if you spend all day long at a computer, and it's great on sore muscles. It also works well for a warm-up or a cool-down depending on what your routine is. So we're going to be doing 25 seconds of each of these exercises. There's no rest in between, and we're starting off with some neck stretches. So we're going to be looking left and right. You can go ahead and start before the timer does. So we're just looking as far as you can this way, and then opposite direction. So throughout this entire stretching routine, you're not forcing anything. You get to the part where you feel tension and then gently push a little more, but never to the point of pain. So make sure to listen to your own body. Nice deep breaths while you're doing this. The kind of thing, if you do this while you're sitting there at a computer all day, you feel so much better when you're done. All right, next up we're going to take our necks and go from side in the same kind of slow, deliberate way. Surprising what just a few minutes of exercise can do for your stress and energy levels. It's kind of incredible, really. Alright, next up you're doing neck rolls. So you're going to scoop down and back up through the slide over here. So this should feel really good, especially on tight muscles. Start going overhead, of course. Nice, relaxing on your own stretch.
Great to clear the Great Lakes office.
Next up, you're going to straighten the rolls. We're going to go forward and back. Right here, big circles. Same thing in the opposite direction. Start moving your feet around a little bit if you want to, too. You're staying standing the whole time. I try to make this easy to do if you're in a cubicle or an office and wearing work clothes. So, no excuses here. So 5 seconds left, and we're going to switch to arm swings.
Just be careful.
And swing your arms one over top of the other, alternating, which is on top each time. Alright, next up you're going to do torso twists. So plant your feet, try to keep your hips fixed, and turn as much as you can without doing this. So keep your hips stable, and then rotate with the weights. Kind of stretch through your sides and your stomach. Got 5 seconds left, and we're going to switch to toe touch circles.
Don't worry, I can't do it. Just do your best.
We're getting sweaty now.
We'll bring your wrist and you're going to touch your forearm. So one stretch here, stretching the opposite way there. Five seconds left, and you're going to slowly let go of the pole. Right here, stretch up, pick yourself in the butt there, your quads. And then pulling your shoulder blades back and together, staying nice and tall. You're doing the stretch with your arms.
Come on, say it.
So forward, kind of round your back, and then do the opposite. Just stick your chest out. Good chest stretch and a long leg stretch. And next up, you're doing a side lean torso stretch. So just rocking back and forth from side to side. A nice fluid motion. Feel stretch through those obliques. Right, 5 seconds left, and we're going to do an overhead stretch with the floor sleeve. Deep breath, hands over your head, stretch out everything, give me your fingertips. Enjoy that for just a second. Now come down, sweep the floor, come back up.
Pretty cool view watching everyone go back up. I wish I had my phone to like, yeah.
And that is already it. So, whether you're using this at your computer desk or before or after workout.
I don't think there's enough room like you.
Right, yeah. You gotta get
Can't pull the hammy there.
All right.
Yeah.
Does everyone feel, all stretched out now? All ready to go after sitting all day? All right, so that kind of physical activity releases a lot of serotonin, right? It releases a lot of those chemicals that our body needs to pull us out of those stressed out situations. Alright, so signs of stress in yourself. So there's a million different signs of stress. You have to be able to recognize them in yourself before you can help your team, right? It's like when you get on the airplane and they tell them to always put the oxygen mask over your own mouth first before you help someone else. Right? It's the same idea. If you're stressed, you're not going to be able to help your teams not be stressed. It's almost impossible because they will actually feed off of that stress. Just like a smile is contagious, so is stress. We have a few million neurons in our brain that are dedicated solely to reading the body language of everyone else around us and putting us into that same state. So if we detect someone else's stress, we are also going to go down that same path. So if we detect our leader is stressed, well, we're going to also be stressed. Even though we don't necessarily know why, it's all part of evolution, essentially, to make us be more social with each other and form cohesive groups. All right, so just a smattering of things, right? So you might notice memory problems, right? You know, all of a sudden I can't remember as much as I used to, right? I can't concentrate, I'm making bad decisions, right? That's that part of our brain that makes those decisions, that can remember. That's going into a low power mode. And for those of you who want these, the slides are going to be available on the Agile Den when this is all over. So you don't feel the need to take pictures. It's cool, we'll have them available. Not just one person, just a couple people. Alright, so people that are stressed are going to see the negative in a lot of stuff. Right, they're going to either have problems sleeping, or they might sleep all the time. It's different for every person. You might eat more, you might eat less. Right, I eat giant bowls of popcorn when I'm stressed. Right, so it's a good thing there was popcorn for snack this morning. Right, you might feel more achy, you might get a lot more colds, you might get a lot more flus. That's a weird word. Now they say it's a lot more of the flu. Feel a lot of anxiety. Right? So these are all stress that's in ourselves. So we also have to recognize it within our team. Right? So all the same things that are in us, we have to recognize in our team. And you can usually do it by reading the room, right? This is why it's also super important to have webcams on if we're working remotely, because you can see it in people's faces, right? If you were here for one of the earlier sessions, they talked about virtual body language, and and Erin talked about how even her stress came through in the email she was sending because of how she talked about it. As a leader, it's important to be able to recognize those signs of stress in our teammates. Right? Lost a sense of humor, right? You get a team that's been together for a while, they usually tell jokes, but when the stress gets on, all of a sudden, people start to get offended. Very easily. Right? It happens. Right? We just have to recognize it for what it is and handle it. It's fine. Right? All of a sudden they have difficulty making decisions. This is probably the biggest one. All of a sudden a team that's been self-organizing, right? They pull the work. They've never had issues making decisions in the past. Now they're like, no, you tell me what you want me to do. I'm out, right? I don't want to deal with this anymore. I feel way too stressed for this. General increased drama is probably my favorite line up there, right? I don't know how to necessarily define what drama is on a team, but you know it when you see it, right?
All right, we're going to talk about the body language. So the first thing with sensing or being able to tell when your team is stressed is to know their tells first and kind of know who they are. For instance, I work with Brett. If he's twitchy, if he's moving, if he's constantly doing things, I know he's not stressed. That's just Brett. So make sure you know your team. We talked about facial expressions. When your camera's on, virtual, we talked about eyebrows. When they're raised, that they're looking like they're disagreeing or they're just not understanding things. And then other cues we can look for, if people are rolling their eyes or shaking their heads, if they're fidgeting in a nervous manner. Facial expressions showing disagreement, or even people looking around the room to see if anybody else is mad and kind of agrees with them and their points of view. Whispering or writing notes back and forth. A lot of us, again, virtual, on WebEx. Are they looking at their phone? Does it look like they're texting people? Can you tell that they're Skyping or writing messages to people while you're in that meeting. So if they're yawning, they're uninterested, don't be afraid to stop the meeting and do those check-ins. How's everybody feeling? How are we doing? Is everyone okay with this? And call their attention to it. All right, so some ways to reduce conflict. The best defense against conflict is to prepare for your meetings. Have an agenda. For your agenda, you'll want to send it out to your team and get their input, get their feedback, any additions, and then make sure it's approved before the meeting starts. If there's an approved agenda, first of all, right off the bat, the team already feels heard. And if there's an agenda, there's less chance that they're going to get off course and try to create their own agenda. So you're already reducing conflict before you even walked into the meeting. Number 2 is depersonalization. Take out any names and situations. If you're looking at ideas, alternative solutions, take out the names of the people who are involved and who suggested it, and actually look at the task at hand, the skills at hand, and depersonalize it. Remove and reduce any threats. Conflict will arise in a team if any teammate feels that their role, their reputation, or their ideas are threatened. So be sure that you're clear on the why, the what, and the how of the decisions that are being made. And there might be a time that they do have to be threatened, feel threatened about their role. And if there's anything that's any personal, sensitive issues, acknowledge it and schedule a one-on-one and agree to take it offline or address it at a later date. All right, so now, as a member of your team, you're able to recognize when you're tense and when you're stressed. So we're going to look at our 5 senses in ways that you can reduce stress in your cue. So we're going to look at practical things you can do while at work. All right, the first one is taste. Chewing on a piece of sugarless gum. Having some chocolate at your desk. Another one, eating fresh fruit or a healthy snack that has a crunch to it. You can eat energizing candies that consist of lemon, ginger, or peppermint. Sipping on hot coffee or, in the summer, a cool beverage. And then sipping chamomile tea. Chamomile is actually used to treat anxiety and insomnia and promote relaxation. You might even have to replace your coffee with water or tea. I know. But a lot of that caffeine can make you extra anxious. All right, number 2, your smells. You can have a lavender or a scent that you like type lotion at your desk that you use during the day, before a meeting. Go for a walk. Enjoy the smell of the fresh outdoors. Smell some flowers. And during your breaks or at home, you could spray your favorite perfumes, those smells. Cologne, obviously not in the office. I wouldn't want everyone in here spraying perfume or cologne. And then essential oils, diffusers. They even have the rollers now that do all sorts of things, anxiety, stress. So you can have a essential oil roller at your desk as well. All right, number 3 is touch. First thing, sitting up straight. When you're stressed, you actually tend to slouch, and that impacts your spine and your lungs, actually making it harder for you to breathe. Standing up, using your stand-up desk, getting out of your desk and standing for a few minutes. Walking around the office, going outside and going for a walk. Giving yourself a hand or neck massage, doing those head rolls or those stretches that we just went over, or even just squeezing a stress ball. Number 4 is sight. Obviously, we don't have time throughout the day to do visual meditations on YouTube or in the middle of a meeting, so we have to create those kind of soothing scenes for ourselves. The first one is your desktop on your background. You can make it a beautiful scenic landscape, and then when you're tense, you just take a break, pause, and kind of imagine that you're where your background is. Seeing photos of people being loved or cared for actually mutes the brain's threat response, so having pictures of your family at your desk. Adding any plants and flowers or just colors that lift your spirits. And then the final one is hearing, sound. So like today, if you're stressed out at work today, focusing on the speaker, kind of getting out of your head and out of your worries and just focusing on the task at hand when you're in a meeting, putting down your phone, putting down all your thoughts and focusing on the task at hand. You can also turn on natural waves, water running, birds chirping, things like that at your desk while you're sitting there. If you're at home, wind chimes, small water fountains, And then you can even just obviously listen to uplifting music or hum your favorite tune.
All right, so if we see our team is stressed when we're in the middle of a meeting, right? We talked about that you can't actually make good decisions while you're stressed very easily. So you're actually money ahead to just kill the meeting right there and come back in a few minutes, right? It takes, on average, 20 minutes for cortisol to clear the body, right? That stress. But you can usually get away with a little shorter break if you need to, because it's still going to get the body's going to be rebooting at that time. So there's a few different things you can either encourage your team to do, or that you can do yourself in a 5-minute break to reduce that stress level, right? We're going to come back, we're going to discuss the issue, make sure it's clear, make sure it's transparent. Call it out for what it is if you are going to do it. Hey guys, things seem really tense. Let's take a break. I suggest everyone go for a walk. Go do something that's going to help, right? Because we need to make this decision, but we can't do it like this, right? It's only going to lead us to bad decisions. Right? You can do mindfulness meditation, and we're actually going to do some of that later. So I let the surprise out of the bag a little bit, but we are going to do a little bit of meditation. I want to be transparent about it. Right? Sometimes things get to the point where it doesn't seem like anything's working, and you have to take some kind of extreme measure just to snap people out of it. Right? One thing I learned doing foster care, and we actually have to do a bunch of training on how this all works, like in the brain, is that sometimes you have to do some kind of physical shock or something crazy to snap people out of that stressed out response.
When you feel so mad that you want to run, take a deep breath and count to 4. I wanted to play twice, but someone picked it first, and that made me mad. Really, really mad. When you feel so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4. 2, 3, 4.
I think we've all been there before, right? By the way, do you notice what technique they're using, even with children? Square breathing, right? It works for everyone. By the way, thank you to Mike Johnson for that little bit of inspiration. He did that with a team once, and I thought it was just wonderful. But sometimes you have to shock the system to pull people out of that mode of thinking and do something kind of weird, kind of off the wall, right? Daniel Tiger's everywhere. You have children, who usually know who Daniel Tiger is. All right, so one of the other things we can do then with our teams is actually put it into an agreement. Right? So there's kind of 4 basic agreements on how we can handle stress, right? And get it out there in the open right away. First one, we're all one team. Recognizing that everything we do affects all of us, right? Even though we are individuals, making individual decisions, every decision we make affects all of us, and we are in this together, right? And some of that is being able to give your team the benefit of the doubt as well, right? Dang it, now the words just escaped my brain for a second. But it's treating everyone on your team like they have good intent, even if they make a mistake, right? We treat everyone on the team like they have the best intentions of the team in mind. We can agree to it, and then we can call back to that agreement. Holly mentioned earlier that depersonalizing the situation helps. This is one of those times, right? Because now we have it as an agreement, right? We agree that we're going to generally consider everything to be in the best interest of the team, and if we make a mistake, we'll talk about it. Cool. All right? So we're all one team. We're all in this together. Let's get it down on paper, right? And you don't necessarily need to do this right away, but if you find your team is increasingly in stressful situations, go for it. Right? Apparently I covered this one as part of the last one. Right? Our decisions affect all of us. We're all individual people making individual decisions on a day-to-day basis. But anything we decide affects all of us, so we need to talk to our team. We need to understand how that interactions work. And let's talk about it. Let's put it into the team agreements that we're doing. How do we actually make decisions as a team? How do we come to these things? When do we talk about decisions? What does that all look like? Don't make assumptions, right? weird sometimes that we have to call this out, but it can be important, right? We're not going to make the assumption that the other person is being a little crazy, right? Let's ask them, right? Let's actually get this all out in the open. And always do your best, right? It's kind of cliche, but if we can agree as a team that we're always going to try to do our best, recognizing that sometimes we're just not going to get there, right? We're human beings, right? That's a lot of what we've talked about, is that we are human beings with semi-irrational brains, right? We're a million different neurons telling a story to ourselves. It's my definition of consciousness. So, I mean, you can talk about that later at happy hour. Right? But sometimes we're going to go below that line a little bit, right? We're that spot where we're in that fear mode. Let's just recognize that we are all that way, right? And then how do we get back above that? How do we get back to that spot of, hey, we're all moving forward together? Right? Just getting that out in the open and coming to that agreement that, yeah, we all agree we're always going to try to do our best, but we're not always going to make it, can be huge for setting that tone for your team. And it gives the team the permission to recognize when they're feeling, when they are feeling stressed. It's okay. We just got to recognize it. Recognize it for what it is. All right. Another technique you can use with your teams is to actually focus on actionable goals. So I know you guys are just chomping at the bit to work together again. So this is going to be a team activity that we are going to do together. Right? Have you guys seen the circle of control? Right? Things that we can control go in the middle. Things that we can influence go around it. Things that we can't control or we can't influence at all go on the outside. So we're going to do an activity together at your tables. There are sticky notes, or giant sticky sheets scattered around the edges of the room. So you're probably going to have someone go and grab them. Just wait 1 second though while I finish the instructions. Oh, it's not the next slide. I thought I put it in. Apparently I did not. So, but what I would like you to do is we're going to take 15 minutes. Your team is going to come up with a situation, preferably something that someone at your table is dealing with their teams. Right? Hopefully not just the traffic is terrible, what can we do about it? Right?